because I Googled Patrick George and there's an artist called Patrick George, a painter. And I was like, maybe like someone's going to like paint me for something.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for tuning back into Decent Exposure. And yes, we are still in lockdown and I am still at home, but that isn't going to stop me bringing you more incredible interviews from all your favourite performers and artists. Now, today's guest I am so excited for. She is known for her gorgeous looks, her incredible singing and her fabulous dancing, and he is known for his kindness, intelligence, and for helping to educate the world on the LGBTQIA+ community. It is, of course, Miss Courtney Act, aka Jenek.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel.
I've been chowing down on a pink lady.
Oh, who hasn't? Happy belated Pride to you as well.
Thank you, you too.
How was Pride for you this year? Obviously a bit different to previous years.
I watched the Global Pride broadcast, which like, you know, like lots of things like at home sort of thing. Sometimes you're like, oh, this is really cute. And I switched on the Global Pride one. And at first I was like, oh, I think this is going to be a bit dull. But it was so adorable because it started like in the Polynesian Islands and then Australia and like Asia. And so there was all of these queer people from Singapore and Indonesia and different parts of Asia where they have different laws for homosexuality and such. And it was just like, I just sat there crying, like listening to all these beautiful messages. And it's been great to be able to combine the force of Pride behind queer people of color and, you know, trans people of color and just sort of have that be a focus point this Pride.
Well, you have actually made it to one Pride this year, though, haven't you? We saw you at Lassiter's.
Errands for Pride at Lassiter's. It was so much fun. It was so much fun filming it, but it was actually like so much fun watching it. I didn't get to watch it on the telly in Australia. So when it came out in Australia a few weeks prior, they just sent me a link, which isn't quite as fun.
Yeah.
But I loved here, like flipping through the channel guide.
Yeah.
I don't know why there's something, it felt so much like more exciting, like flipping through the channel guide and pushing Neighbours, like flipping over to Channel 5, like watching all of the advertisements and things made it feel like I was watching good old-fashioned television like I did when I was a kid, like when I used to watch Neighbours when I was a kid.
I first became aware of you, like so many British people, especially when you were on RuPaul's Drag Race. You came onto the show and you really set a brand new level of just looking absolutely flawless at all times. You placed top 3 in what was, my opinion, the best series of Drag Race there's been. In an interview I saw with you, though, you said that you felt the final edit of the show didn't quite reflect your journey when you were actually filming the show. How do you feel about the whole experience now?
I mean, I love being there. I love filming it all, being with Adore and Bianca and Darian and Ben and Milk and Trinity and Jocelyn and, now I've started, I have to finish. Gia, Laganja, April, Vivacious, Magnolia. And I wasn't there with Kelly Mantle. Did I get everybody? I bet you I missed someone. Anyway, it was a really, really fun experience. And that was the thing, is that we all had so much fun. And I remember I saw commenting on how it was like such a friendly, fun, no conflict, no bitchiness, no drama sort of group. And we were wondering like what they were going to do. We were just so like kumbaya about everything. And so then I guess when I watched it back and I saw the way it had been sort of portrayed on television didn't really match not just my experience, because obviously I'm more than capable of thinking that one thing's happening, but a totally different thing's happening. But seemingly other people who were there's experience as well, it kind of contradicted. So it was a challenge, but you know what? It made me work a lot harder to define who I am and to showcase who I am. I think because of that, because I didn't feel sort of appropriately represented, I really tried hard to use social media to tell my own story. On Big Brother, when I spoke to the producers, they were like, oh yeah, we saw your Gender 101 video and we saw your Trump rally video and we just loved the way that you had conversations with people and it wasn't about conflict, it was about educating and explaining, and that's what we want to do on Big Brother this year. And I was like, oh, amazing. I'm always about finding silver linings where possible. And so I think that's probably the silver lining of the whole experience.
Now, as you just mentioned, you were, of course, on Celebrity Big Brother over here in the UK, and not just on it, you won it. And it was the first time that the British public, the general British public, obviously you had your Drag Race fans, but the general British public got to see you. And to be honest, even for the Drag Race fans, we'd only really been exposed to Courtney at that point. So to actually see Shane, you know, in so much detail was great. You really helped an audience to learn a lot of different things. Was there anything that you learned from the experience?
I had an idea going into there, an intellectual concept that, you know, Anne Widdecombe was going to, I mean, I knew that she had very different values to me. And I went in there with the understanding that I probably wasn't going to change her mind, but we were civil and we had lots of conversations. You know, not all of them were aired, but we had lots of conversations about different things and all of them were civil. I learned a lot from those conversations with Anne, not necessarily about what she was telling me, but more about how she chose to tell me. Because she went into the house first. I didn't know who she was before she went into the house, but fortunately I had a few days where all of the women went into the house and I quickly Googled and read as many things as possible. And I made a list of some of the pieces of legislation that she voted against. Like every single piece of pro-LGBT legislation that ever came before her, she voted against. And one of them was about the equalization of the age of consent for same-sex people. And she said that she voted against it because she actually thought that the age of consent, it's the ghost of Anne Widdecombe.
Yeah.
She voted against the equalisation of the age of consent because she felt that it was too low for heterosexual people. So in fact, she said that she was voting, you know, to protect in her mind the rights of same-sex people. But the piece of information that was lacking there is how many times had she brought legislation to the parliament to raise the age of consent for heterosexual people. Actually, I haven't Googled that. Maybe she did, but I'm going to say that she probably didn't. Yeah, it was just interesting seeing how she sort of used very clever and thought out and nuanced arguments to never really say anything that tiptoed necessarily into hate speech. Yet clearly that's what was going on. It was sort of a surreptitious hate speech in a way. I mean, as referenced through her views on so many other things like conversion therapy and Section 28. And so, yeah, it was interesting. And I think that the thing that I learned was she didn't think she was a horrible person. She didn't think she was a mean person. She thought that she was very moral and very ethical in what she did. And she was doing it for whatever her morals and her perceived ethics dictated. And I think that's always important to remember when arguing against people, is whilst we might see people who oppose our views as being, you know, evil or hateful, they don't think that about themselves at all. They think they're being very good. And so it's about trying to understand how they got there and understand how you can insert some understanding. Someone like Anne is 70 years old and has been a career politician. I don't think that I was ever going to change her mind, but I was aware that people at home might be listening and might learn something more. But I think just in general, kind of coming to understand how people got to their beliefs can be a really powerful way in how you approach not changing, but like giving them the information that will hopefully lead them to change. Sort of strange noise coming from outside.
It's Anne.
It's Anne again. Open the curtain. She's just like...
So you identify as a pansexual, and I'll admit, even as a gay man, I had to Google the correct definition for it. In a YouTube video I saw that you made, you had a great explanation of pansexual and bisexual, how they fit into the LGBT plus community, and also how they're hugely underrepresented in the community. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that?
I mean, for me, pansexual means I'm attracted to people regardless of their gender. The majority of my sexual attraction is for men, but I have had sexual relations with people of different genders. Like, it's funny because I grew up as a gay man in the gay community, and so that identity is still obviously very much a part of who I am. But then as I got older, I realized that there was something powerful about the inclusiveness of a pansexual identity. And because I had had sexual relations with people of different genders, it felt like it was true. And I think that I think for me, it just is about signaling that for me, attraction is beyond someone's sex or gender. And then how that falls into the LGBTQIAQ plus spectrum. I mean, it's interesting because it depends on who you talk to. There's different descriptions, but one of them that seems to be most accepted is that bisexual is a term that means attracted to people who are the same gender as you and attracted to people of different genders to you, which is sort of the same as pansexual, but pansexual sort of came up to be more inclusive of trans identities and so on. But now the bisexual description has kind of caught up to match that. So bisexual people would describe that there's an umbrella of bi identities, and pansexual would be one of them that comes underneath that. But really it's all just sort of like a spectrum, I think, from one end to the other and where you lay along that sort of Kinsey scale.
Yeah, I definitely think a lot of people, myself included in this, when you grow up not quite knowing yourself or living in a community where you can't quite find yourself, you end up becoming desperate to find an identity and find your tribe and find a label to give yourself. And then you feel like once you've had that you're stuck with that label, that's what you are.
You can change your labels as often as feels true to you, I think. And I've definitely changed my labels. Started off like we all did, I think, as a default straight, even though that never really seemed to make sense.
Never quite took off.
No. When I came out, I identified as bisexual. The problematic thing is that quite often gay men can choose the label of bisexual as a halfway house on their way to being gay because it feels more comfortable. Yeah. And then the thing about that is that it can invalidate the bisexual identity because a lot of people think, oh yeah, I called myself bisexual once, but now I know I'm gay. And a lot of gay men are quite guilty of shaming bi people and saying like, honey, you're gay. But ultimately, bisexual people exist. There are people who are attracted to more than one gender. It doesn't have to be 50-50. It doesn't have to be in the same way, or it doesn't have to be emotional and sexual. And then I decided I was gay, and then I struggled sort of with my gender identity for a long time, not quite knowing where I fit in. I internally sort of struggled with the idea that I might be trans. I learned about the terms gender fluid and gender queer and in my early 30s, and that was kind of like a really big liberator for me because I'd struggled with my femininity and masculinity for so long. And the thing that really liberated me from feeling like I was inadequate as a man was the idea of gender fluidity, that boys could be feminine and girls could be masculine, and that you could express your gender however you wanted. Hearing different, more specific labels as we get further, down the journey and seeing what fits us and without trying things on in an experimental sense, I do think there is something kind of important about seeing what labels you identify with and seeing what suits you and pushing outside that comfort zone in a way and expanding your own perceptions. But yeah, I mean, I like all of the labels. I think that I've now come to a point where I feel so comfortable with myself that weirdly, I just feel like me.
Yeah.
Those labels don't really feel like that necessary anymore. But I still talk about them because I know how helpful they were for me discovering who I was and becoming comfortable with myself.
Now, obviously, we're in lockdown for the foreseeable future, but next year, very excitingly, you're going to be coming back to the UK in April with your show Fluid.
I am.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the show and how it sort of came about?
I did the show in Sydney at the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras earlier this year, and then was meant to tour it around the world, but that got postponed. But I started writing it last year in the UK. I wrote all of the songs. It's all original music. People in the UK might be familiar with Six, the musical.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. And I wrote a few of the songs from the show with Lucy and Toby, who wrote Six.
Oh my God, amazing.
With their friend Zach, who also wrote Hot Gay Time Machine. The four of us all got together and we wrote two really great songs. One is kind of like the emotional core of the show, right, and the other one is like the jester of the show. But I love them both, those songs that we wrote together. Then I also wrote songs by myself, and I wrote some other songs with some guys in LA. It's all original music with live band. It's the first time I've done a show of all of originals, which is super exciting.
Yeah.
Because the stories then became so much more authentic because the music was so authentic. Like before, when I was singing like a cover of a Madonna song and trying to sort of adapt a story to it, it worked, but this just felt like, this feels legit. And I'm just super excited. It's 14 dates all around the UK and Europe. I'm going to Amsterdam, Berlin, and Paris for the first time, as well as a bunch of other places I haven't been, like Bath. And I haven't been to Newcastle before, or maybe I'm lying. Maybe I have been on like a AAA Girls tour.
I mean, I think if you've been to Newcastle, you tend to know you've been to Newcastle.
Or it's just a blank.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You're in Cardiff as well. There's a few dates, but I'm going to put a link in the box down below to the tour so people can check out all the dates.
Courtneyac.com/fluid. That's Courtneyac.com/fluid.
So, Shane, we've now got to the part of our interview where I get decent exposure on you. I'm going to ask you a series of questions and you just answer in your own time. So here we go. Question 1. One item you couldn't live without.
Looking around. Let me just grab. When I was living in Los Angeles, I found this in my drawer. And my friend Mitch was like, it's an apple cutter. And I was like, that is the dumbest thing ever. And I started using it. And I think it's just the most magical invention. So much so that when I moved to London, I bought one myself. You put the apple, and it cores it and slashes it.
So question number 2. Which talent or skill would you most like to wake up with tomorrow?
Perfect pitch. I want to be able to just sing any note and know that it's correct. Willem has relative pitch. Like Willem will be like, why did you lower that song by a tone? And I'm like, what do you mean? How do you know that? And she's like, well, because the original's like da 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 da, and yours is da 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 da. I'm like, how do you know that? And she's like, well, I can hear it. And I'm like, what? And then I did a test. I'm like, okay, sing the key of this song. And she can, like, her brain.
Oh, really?
knows. And whenever we're in clubs singing like AAA Girls gigs, the sound is always horrible and it's always so hard to hear. And as a singer, I'm like, I know I sound horrible right now because I can't hear myself.
Yeah.
So I always just try and listen for what Willem's doing because she's always correct.
What is your most overused word or phrase?
Like?
Question number 4. A job you would like to do besides your own?
I thought that I might like to be like maybe it would be fun to be in politics one day. But then I thought about it more and I was like, I think you can be a lot more effective outside of politics than you can from the inside. So that didn't answer the question.
No! A quality you like about yourself?
I feel like the next question is going to be a quality you don't like about yourself. I like that I love learning. I think like learning is my kink. Like I get really excited by being wrong about something because then I've realized that I've learnt something new and that excites me.
Now you guessed it, a quality you dislike about yourself.
Sometimes I don't know whether it's being Australian because it doesn't seem as much of an issue in the UK or in Australia as it does as America, but like I can be quite direct about things.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. I'm sat here with my husband who is from Melbourne. Shane has just said, as an Australian, sometimes people can think I can be a bit too direct.
I mean...
It's like, yeah, carry on.
It's an Australian thing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is.
I have always felt, which I feel like in some way it comes back to the Drag Race edit. I've always thought that being direct is being really compassionate because a lot of people aren't direct, especially in America. Everyone's like, yes, you look sickening. And it's like, do you know what? Actually, this is the truth. And to me, that's actually like a really lovely thing to do. But it's not always taken that way, especially by Americans. Brits are a lot better at it, I think. But yeah, ruffle people's feathers.
Yes, it can, can't it? It can ruffle a few feathers. A quality you like in another person?
Well, one thing that always makes me like tear up is allyship. Like if I'm watching a movie or a TV show and there's like someone who like reaches across the threshold and is there to support someone even though it doesn't affect them personally.
Now, a quality you dislike in another person?
Cunts.
Yeah.
Hypocrisy. Oh.
Now, question number 9. What has been your greatest accomplishment so far?
After winning Celebrity Big Brother, my whole career changed, which for me has been like the biggest shift in my career that has been really amazing and validating for me. And I'm very career focused. So I'm going to say that was my biggest career accomplishment and therefore my biggest accomplishment.
And what is your greatest fear in life so far?
I mean, I had a friend who isn't that old, who's sort of incapacitated in a assisted care facility. And they were an amazing creative. And I go and visit them and they're like not what they used to be. And it's just so sad going to visit them because I think it's kind of like that fear of being like old and alone and incapacitated and also like not being able to end it.
Yeah.
Like being just like stuck until your body finally gives way. There's something really horrible about that, I think.
Next question. Would you rather continue with your life as it is now or restart it knowing everything that you know?
Oh, definitely continue as it is now. Because that's how I got here.
Yeah.
If I knew everything, then it'd be totally different. And I like this life.
And my final question for you. What are you most grateful for in life?
I think my mum and my dad.
Your mum and dad are just the best.
I love my mum and dad. They've always been such wonderful parents. And as an adult, the cool thing is like that they're so willing to listen and learn and have conversations. And yeah, they're really cool.
So Shane, thank you so much for joining me on Decent Exposure today. I really hope you enjoyed the experience.
I did. Thank you for having me.
So what's next? As we say, we've got your Fluid tour coming up next year. What have you got planned before that?
Well, I have just released new music, which is super exciting. 3 new songs, which are from the show Fluid. I released a drop of fluid prematurely. Just a premature drizzle. I should have been a premature drizzle of fluid. That's what it should have been called. I've been writing a book, which comes out in February next year, slowly waiting for the world to start turning again.
Amazing. Well, Miss Courtney Act, aka Shane Jenek, thank you so much for joining us on Decent Exposure. But for now, thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.